The story opens with Takeru Kamishiro dragging himself through the same commute to the same dead-end job day after day in his dull, joyless life. People always told him that sticking to routine was the path to happiness, but deep down, a part of him longed for something different, just like everyone. One evening, as he stares at a strange scene flickering on his television, he suddenly finds himself transported somewhere completely unexpected. Then a mysterious man appears before him, claiming to be overseer of the entire solar system. Kamishiro stares in bafflement and asks if that makes him some sort of alien. The figure shakes his head, saying he's closer to a deity, then shows Kamishiro a planet known as Madeus. No matter what is tried, Madeus fails to prosper and its civilizations rise and collapse over and over again. The cycle of failure has lasted too long, and the man has decided on a radical approach. He's gonna hit the planet with just one single drop of water because even that tiny amount can stir up massive waves that flip the world upside down. And to Kamishiro's shock, he has been chosen to become that drop of water. Kamishiro is overwhelmed by the weight of this duty, but the deity calmly explains that he's no longer alive anyway. If he refuses, his soul will simply fade into nothingness. But to sweeten the choice, the deity offers him abilities and any powers he desires. He starts by granting Kamishiro magic and an endless supply of mana, but then he stops and asks what else Kamishiro wants for himself. At once, Kamishiro's fear turns to excitement. Grinning, he declares that he wants a cute harem to join him on this journey. To his delight, the deity assures him that he'll meet them eventually, then continues stacking on more perks. He enhances Kamishiro's search skills, allows him to earn money by selling harvested materials, and gives him a special bag that can hold everything he gathers. He also grants him universal language comprehension, along with resistances to strengthen his defense. Before long, Kamishiro's form begins to fade, and his transfer is about to begin. The deity pauses, wondering aloud if he might have overloaded Kamishiro with too many blessings, but it's too late to undo them. Still, unease flickers across his face when he glimpses the partner Kamishiro is destined to meet, so he questions whether it will truly be alright. Kamishiro panics at his words, but there's no time left for answers, and the deity only tells him that everything will be fine, just before Kamishiro vanishes. A second later, Kamishiro opens his eyes in a brand new world, now inside a brand new body. He has no real clue what the hell he's meant to do, so he heads off to find a spot where people are. Before long, he comes across a village, but quickly realizes he won't be able to buy food without any cash. That's when he remembers the deity had boosted his search ability so he could track down materials to sell. Kamishiro tries activating the search magic, but nothing happens, leaving him disappointed. After a second thought, he realizes he was pronouncing it wrong because the moment he says it correctly, glowing symbols appear all around him. These markings highlight where materials are located, and when he says the word scan, more detailed information shows up. Thrilled with how useful the ability is, Kamishiro feels lucky when the very first item he picks up turns out to be ranked B. He then spends more time collecting everything that pops up under the ability, but most of them end up being junk. Almost all are marked as E rank, though one strange shiny rock catches his attention. It looks valuable because of how polished and bright it seems, only to reveal itself as an ant's poop. He's baffled why it gets ranked as a C, but still satisfied, since he learns the things he can sell are sorted by different marks, and his search skill points them out easily. With his bag now stuffed full, Kamishiro rushes off to the village, eager to see how much cash he can make. At the gate, the guard assumes he's a knight because of how ridiculously tall he is, but Kamishiro quickly explains he's just a material gatherer. The guard, who introduces himself as Marlowe, says that kind of work is rare, and though the village doesn't have a shop specialized for materials, they do have a general store. So our boy heads straight there, and when he shows the shopkeeper the poop, the man's eyes practically sparkle. He identifies it as droppings from a hammer anteater, and is absurdly impressed by its perfect shape and rich color. Praising Kamishiro for finding such a fine specimen, he offers him 5 gold coins for it. Kamishiro has no idea what that's worth, so the shop owner explains, a single night in the inn costs 500 raves and 1 gold coin equals 1,000 raves. Kamishiro quickly calculates in his head and realizes the man's about to pay him the equivalent of 50,000 yen for literal crap. When Kamishiro accepts, the shopkeeper gets overly excited and even rubs the damn thing on his cheek like it's treasure, making Kamishiro stand there in disbelief that someone is cherishing a freaking ant poop. Kamishiro then lays out the rest of his haul, and the shopkeeper stares in disbelief that Kamishiro managed to gather everything on his own. He questions why someone would bring such valuable loot to a backwater shop, but Kamishiro casually replies that he just likes wandering around while collecting whatever he can find. Impressed by his talent, the man decides to ask a favor. He explains there's a vein of mithril hidden in the nearby mountains, and he wants Kamishiro to retrieve it. Kamishiro lives for adventure, so he agrees. The man then counts out 360,000 raves for the lot. Doing the math nearly knocks Kamishiro out cold, because that's about 3.6 million yen. But before letting him go, the merchant warns him that there are monsters in the mountains, but he's confident Kamishiro can handle himself. But before heading up there, Kamishiro spends the night at an inn where a young girl brings him a simple bowl of water. The cost is 30 raves, and Kamishiro is baffled when she explains it's for washing himself. Naturally, he'd prefer a bath, but he nearly loses it when she tells him there are no baths here at all. Sorcerers sometimes offer cleaning spells, but the town doesn't have any. Hearing the word magic sparks an idea in Kamishiro's head, so he pays for the water and sends the girl away. Once alone, he experiments with a few chants, and the moment he says clean, the spell activates, and in an instant, he feels fresher than he ever has in his entire life. That's when he realizes he can cast basically any spell as long as he figures out the right word for it. On the road to the mountain, Kamishiro begins to get used to his new skills, and he's startled when he suddenly sees a spade symbol appear for the first time. Excited, he goes to check it out, only to be horrified when it leads him to a skeleton. His ability even reveals the person's name, their rank, and details of their past, and what stands out most is a family amulet lying beside the remains. His magic shows that it was handmade by the man's mother, and when Kamishiro reads the letter tucked inside, his chest tightens. It's a heartfelt note from the man's sister begging him not to overwork himself. Feeling he can't just walk away, Kamishiro carefully buries the skeleton before moving on to another area. There he creates a protective barrier, tosses several herbs he picked earlier into a bowl, adds seasoning, and finishes it off with some meat. When he takes a sip of the stew, Kamishiro is blown away by how good it tastes. Laughing to himself, he declares that getting thrown into another world might just be the best thing that has ever happened to him. Soon, Kamishiro arrives at the Forest of Ancient Dragons, a deadly region crawling with dangerous creatures. Kamishiro then casts a light spell to illuminate the symbols around him, but he notices there's no aura anywhere. He doesn't even spot a single animal, and he wonders if maybe it's because he reeks so badly. Kamishiro just rolls with it since it means nothing will jump him, and he exhales in relief when the edge of the forest comes into view. Unluckily, it also happens to be the end of the ground under him, and Kamishiro plunges straight off a cliff. He frantically blurts out every magic word he can think of, but none of them do shit. Float does nothing, levitate is useless, but when he finally yells fly, the spell activates. Kamishiro lands safely below and cheers when he sees ore symbols glowing all around. He immediately starts gathering whatever he can, but he still doesn't turn up any mythical ore. Eventually, he spots a faint mark deep inside the mountain wall, so Kamishiro says blaze and hurls a fireball to blast it open. It works flawlessly, revealing mithril at last, though not in large amounts. The cave then begins rumbling, threatening to collapse, but Kamishiro stubbornly presses deeper. He eventually discovers a chamber with water so pure it leaves him stunned, and the scan reveals it as double S rank, making it the most precious resource he's seen yet, and the description says the water holds the magical essence of an ancient dragon, meaning a dragon must be living here. Kamishiro chooses not to panic and starts preparing to collect as much as possible, but before dumping out the plain water in his container, he decides to test if the dragon water is even drinkable, so he scoops up a handful. At that moment, a massive dragon bursts out of the pool, and he's pissed that Kamishiro hasn't acknowledged his presence. Kamishiro freezes in shock, while the dragon is equally shocked that Kamishiro managed to endure his oppressive aura. Panicking, Kamishiro quickly kneels on the ground and apologizes for barging into the dragon's home, and the beast respects his courage. Kamishiro introduces himself, stating plainly that he's human, but the dragon struggles to believe it. He explains that the mana radiating from Kamishiro was so overwhelming that it shook him awake from his deep sleep. Kamishiro doesn't get what the hell he's saying, but the dragon clarifies that the amount of mana pouring out of him could actually match his own or even exceed it. The ancient dragon calls himself Voldius, and he states that he has a favorite ask of him. Voldius recognizes the clean, raw power in Kamishiro, and it makes him believe that Kamishiro might be able to rouse his child. And naturally, the dragon isn't expecting him to do it for nothing, so he promises to hand over a heap of mithril ore in exchange. Voldius presents our guy with the egg that refuses to hatch, but Kamishiro has no idea what the hell he's supposed to do. So Voldius tells him to channel his mana into it the same way he produced his light. Kamishiro then speaks the word heat to warm it, but he panics when a freaking massive force erupts all around him. Something's obviously off, but Voldius bursts into laughter. Kamishiro's body begins to be dragged into the egg, and he thinks about how he only just reached this world, and he was hoping to see more of it before he died. Moments after, Kamishiro ends up in a weird place, and a voice calls him reckless. Kamishiro wonders if this is the deity from before, but realizes it's someone else. This girl says she has been tinkering with this planet for tens of thousands of years, but it only took Kamishiro one day to cause a massive ripple, and she isn't happy about that. Kamishiro has no idea what this girl is even getting at, but the girl simply casts him away. Kamishiro is bewildered when he returns to the world, but relieved when he sees that he managed to make the egg hatch. Voldias asks Kamishiro to name the newborn, but Kamishiro isn't sure if he should. Voldias says it's fine because the child already has its true name, and he only wants Kamishiro to give him his everyday name. Kamishiro agrees to it and christens the baby dragon B for Black. Then Voldias tells B to roam the wide world as much as he desires, and the hatchling immediately joins Kamishiro's party. Kamishiro notes that the little guy was just born and questions whether it's smart for Voldias to let him leave with a stranger like him. But Voldias isn't concerned, and he points out that Kamishiro is stronger than he is and he feels safe in trusting his child in his care. Voldias then delivers Kamishiro's reward by firing a beam at his magic bag, then bids him farewell. Kamishiro then formally asks B if he will come with him on his gathering journey, and the tiny dragon chirps his agreement. Kamishiro couldn't be happier, but before setting off, he takes a moment to use magic to clean up his new partner because the funky little dragon stinks like hell. Kamishiro reaches the surface, bringing B along for his very first experience of the outside world. Since traveling through the forest at night can be risky and his stomach is already growling, Kamishiro decides they'll just make camp and rest until morning. Inside Kamishiro's item box, we find that he's carrying a stash of double S-ranked elemental water. This isn't just ordinary water, it's saturated with magical essence drawn directly from an ancient dragon's overflowing power, so it's crucial for raising a young dragon like B. In fact, Kamishiro's stash is linked directly to the underground lake, thanks to Voldias. So B tells B to drink as much as he likes because they got an unlimited supply, and Kamishiro wants the little guy to grow up strong and healthy. B then insists Kamishiro take a sip too, and when he does, he's amazed by the water's clarity and purity. Before night fully sets in, Kamishiro uses a few enchanted stones to form a protective barrier around their site. According to a book he picked up from Jerome's shop, these stones are highly valuable. But thanks to the divine blessings he received, Kamishiro can produce them without much trouble. Curious about how they work, he uses one to ignite a fire and starts preparing dinner. He then seasons a cut of meat with care and throws together a hearty stew. It's only his second attempt at cooking this dish, but it tastes so good he feels like he could eat it every day. B can't stop staring at the bubbling pot, clearly mesmerized by the aroma, so Kamishiro serves him a portion and warns him to wait because it's still hot. But the impatient hatchling dives right in and ends up burning his tongue. Acting like a proper guardian, Kamishiro cools it down first, and this time B is able to enjoy every bite. With a full belly, B winds down peacefully, and Kamishiro feels relieved knowing he can eat solid food too, because it means he won't be surviving on water alone, and Kamishiro can start trying new recipes for them to enjoy together. Kamishiro then wonders if B misses his father, but B responds by gently hugging him. Kamishiro gets the message that it doesn't matter where they are as long as they're together. The little dragon's affection is enough to make anyone melt, and Kamishiro finds it hard to believe that something so small is classified as a B-rank threat. And that's not even mentioning B's wild skills and stats. Still, Kamishiro's not too focused on that because what matters is that B is still a child and children need direction and care. Switching into full parent mode, Kamishiro gently reminds B that even if he's stronger, that doesn't give him a free pass to act recklessly. He also mentions that Voldias would definitely be upset if anything happened to him, but B is already fast asleep. The following day, Kamishiro climbs his way back up the cliff he originally fell from and arrives at the same forest as before. This time, however, the place looks far less eerie than it did last night, leaving him puzzled over what might have changed while they slept. He shrugs it off, figuring it must be one of those strange enchanted forests, and makes his way back inside. Now seems like the perfect moment to do a little resource hunting, so Kamishiro reminds himself to look for materials around rank C. Activating his detection skill, he scans the area and sees glowing symbols appear above several items nearby, and he collects plenty of intriguing materials. Right then, B suddenly rushes over behind him, visibly shaken. Kamishiro triggers his scan again, but this time he tunes the ability toward locating hostile creatures. This exposes at least 7 foes in the vicinity, which is vastly different from the last time he was in the forest when there were none. Back then, Kamishiro figured his stench had been keeping things away, so now he assumes the scent must have faded. But regardless, they're in danger, and Kamishiro decides that clearing out monsters won't be a bad thing. It'll be good training, and there's always the chance they drop something useful. Right then, things escalate as a massive rock falcon swoops in from behind. It's listed as a C-ranked beast, but Kamishiro doesn't feel even slightly intimidated, and it actually looks pretty adorable compared to the nightmare that was Voldias. His ability shows a readout on the bird, and apparently its meat is incredibly fatty and sweet. That instantly grabs his attention because in Kamishiro's eyes, the creature just transformed into a giant walking ingredient. Wasting no time, Kamishiro throws up a protective barrier around himself and B, then conjures a barrage of ice lances. While he doesn't enjoy taking lives, he tells himself that if it's for survival, he has no choice. With that resolve, he fires the projectiles, piercing the bird with precision and celebrates fresh, high-quality meat secured. B nervously warns that the rest of the monsters have shown up, but Kamishiro only sees them as bonus ingredients. Before the beast can strike, he chants quick to boost his speed and reduction to lighten his frame. Launching into the air to avoid the first attack, Kamishiro coats both arms and legs in a hardening spell and slams down onto one of the monsters. His punches carry far more force than he expected after being reinforced, and his kicks are quite effective too as he smashes another wolf. Kamishiro is pleased with this new tall frame of his because kicks are far more effective with his extra long legs. After mowing through the rest of the pack, he pauses for a breather and begins collecting the mountain of premium meat he just earned. After collecting the materials, Kamishiro notices more monsters starting to close in from the distance. Realizing that pushing forward through constant combat isn't realistic, he pauses to think of a way out. B, overhearing his concern, flaps over and attempts to carry them both away, but it's not exactly easy. Kamishiro suggests trying a different tactic, but the determined hatchling refuses to give up and starts lifting his human companion with all his strength. Kamishiro is genuinely impressed by B's power and decides to help by casting a reduction spell on himself to make his body lighter. The result is a bit too effective, and the two end up soaring high into the sky. While calmly floating upward, Kamishiro tells B they're gaining too much altitude. In response, B lets go, causing Kamishiro to scream as he free falls toward the ground. But thankfully, B catches him just in time before he hits the earth, and Kamishiro is just relieved they both made it out safely. A quick glance at the map confirms they've traveled quite a long way, and he thanks B for his effort in getting them away from danger. Kamishiro reminds him that he's only human, so maybe next time the dragon should take it a bit easier, but B clearly doesn't understand what the fuss is about. Kamishiro brushes it off and says it's fine, then adds that he'll be depending on B again when the time comes. Delighted by the compliment, B squeezes Kamishiro in a hug so strong it nearly crushes him. As they continue walking, Kamishiro comments that the village is still several days away. B, however, seems far more interested in a stick Kamishiro has in his hand. It's just a branch he picked up earlier, but when Kamishiro scans it with his ability, it's revealed to be from Yggdrasil, the mythical tree of legend and ranked at doublest grade. Right then, B seems to get an idea and starts breathing all over the branch. Kamishiro watches in confusion, unsure what the little guy is up to, until suddenly the branch begins to transform into a staff. Apparently, B's breath is saturated with mana, and by enveloping the branch with it, he triggered its hidden potential. Now Kamishiro's left holding a fully formed magical staff, and he's told everyone he's just a low-key material collector, so the thought of being spotted carrying something like this makes him uneasy. It looks awesome, but Kamishiro is not exactly trying to look like some flashy spellcaster. Suddenly, a distant growl echoes through the trees, prompting Kamishiro to warn B to stay close. The sound is intense, so whatever's out there doesn't seem friendly. But instead of backing down, B darts forward, and Kamishiro has no choice but to chase after him. B gestures towards something up ahead, and Kamishiro is startled to discover an elf lying injured on the ground. At first glance, it looks like she might have been attacked by some creature, but the girl quickly clarifies that's not the case. Her stomach lets out an earth-shaking rumble, and Kamishiro realizes this is the terrifying beast he was worried about. She explains that she hasn't had a single bite in 3 days, though what she truly needs is water. Kamishiro hands over the last of his clean drinking supply, and the elf gratefully tells him he's just saved her life. Her hunger isn't going anywhere though, and Kamishiro suddenly remembers the boxed meal the innkeeper packed for him. When he offers it, the elf accepts without hesitation, and Kamishiro quietly notes that she's nothing like the graceful, elegant elves he read about in books. A moment later, he grows concerned when she suddenly stops eating, but it turns out she's just overwhelmed by how good the food tastes. She looks like she's seeing stars, whispering that she's reached heaven, though Kamishiro casually mentions that it's probably just because she was starving. With over-the-top flair, she claims she's been brought back to life by the taste alone. Still, Kamishiro feels something is a little off. They aren't that far from town, and certainly not far enough to completely run out of supplies. She tries to explain it away, saying she left in a hurry, but that excuse doesn't quite sit right either because most travelers pack food just in case. The elf gets irritated with the interrogation, but before she can come up with another excuse, he's hit by a foul smell that derails the conversation completely. He always imagined elves would smell like blooming flowers and crisp peppermint, not like livestock shit. Deeply offended, the girl snaps back, saying it's not her fault because she's been roughing it outdoors for days. Still frustrated by the insult, she thanks Kamishiro for the help, then storms off before he can say anything else. Once she's gone, Kamishiro returns to gathering materials. And as they finally reach the edge of the woods, just as they step out, the two are thrilled to see a passing carriage approaching right on time. Kamishiro stares in awe as the carriage rolls into view, not pulled by a horse, but by a freaking unicorn. While majestic, unicorns are surprisingly common in this world and only considered an E-rank creature. The driver spots Kamishiro's staff and asks if he's a magician of some kind, but Kamishiro quickly clears that up, saying he's nothing more than a material collector and trader. The man is even more impressed by this, noting that someone who specializes in gathering is a rare find. Kamishiro didn't expect that kind of response and quietly admits to himself that he wouldn't exactly call himself a specialist. The driver kindly offers him a ride back to the village, but Kamishiro hesitates, pointing out that he's a tall guy and might not fit comfortably. Fortunately, there's ample space inside, and the family turns out to be very warm and welcoming. Ever since arriving in this world, Kamishiro has noticed that children seem drawn to him. Now that he's practically a parent himself, he doesn't mind it at all. He just hopes he isn't being a burden, but the man reassures him that the village lives by a simple code: help those in need. It's a value the whole family shares, and Kamishiro quietly admires the courage it must take for kids to travel with their parents in such risky territory. The children are incredibly sociable, so Kamishiro gently reminds them not to trust people too quickly. He jokes that he could have been a thief for all they knew, but the boy grins and says he never had a doubt. Their family carries a small bell that rings whenever someone dangerous is nearby. It's a clever little tool, and Kamishiro wonders if he might be able to craft something similar himself. After exchanging names, they start to hear faint chirping coming from inside Kamishiro's coat. The kids get excited, eager to meet whatever kind of creature he's hiding, but Kamishiro warns them that it's no ordinary pet. Eliza curiously comments that monsters aren't anything unusual, and adventurers often travel with them, so there's no need to be so secretive. Kamishiro is relieved to hear that monster companions are common here, and he finally gives Bee permission to come out with the added warning not to bite anyone. Bee pops out with a cheerful grin, and the parents are visibly startled to see an actual dragon. Seeing their reaction, Kamishiro quietly decides that it's probably best not to mention that Bee is the offspring of an ancient one. The family immediately assumes Kamishiro must be a dragon knight, given the fact that he's traveling with an actual dragon. Bee casually explains that he just stumbled across a dragon egg one day. That revelation shocks them even more, since getting a dragon to hatch is no small feat. In fact, for a human to pull it off is practically unheard of. As Bee tugs at Kamishiro playfully, he starts to realize just how unusual this little dragon truly is. Eliza points out that they rarely ever encounter dragon knights, and seeing a real dragon in the flesh is even rarer. Kamishiro, who's only ever seen dragon knights in RPGs, is sure he won't be able to stop staring if he ever meets one in real life. Later that evening, they settle down to make camp. Porin is impressed by the enchanted stones Kamishiro uses to ward off monsters. On top of that, Bee can sense danger before it gets too close, so Kamishiro reassures everyone that they'll be just fine through the night. When Eliza announces that it's time to eat, Kamishiro offers to cook for the group. She gives him the go-ahead, and the kids watch in amazement as Kamishiro starts pulling out a mountain of ingredients. They whisper among themselves, wondering if he's actually a mage, but Kamishiro laughs and tells them it's just a special item bag that can carry far more than it looks. He finishes preparing his go-to-meat soup, but this time he adds a side dish, a mushroom and vegetable salad. The presentation is mouth-watering, and the family dives in eagerly because none of them can remember the last time they had a meal that tasted this good. But just as everyone's enjoying themselves, something seems off with Porin. For a moment, everyone panics, thinking something's wrong, but it turns out the taste moved him to tears. After so many days eating nothing but dry jerky, seeing his children eating real food again overwhelms him. Porin can't hold back the tears, and Kamishiro chuckles at how dramatic he's being. Porin loudly declares that Kamishiro must be a mage and crowns him the Wizard of Flavor. The name gets a big laugh out of everyone, and the cheerful mood carries over into the night as someone pulls out an instrument to play a light tune. The entire family joins in, and the night is filled with music and joy. The warmth of the evening makes Kamishiro reflect. He realizes how many things he's missed out on. Sitting down to eat with others, laughing together, and enjoying the moment, it's a completely different feeling from eating alone in silence. For the first time since arriving in this world, Kamishiro feels a genuine laugh escape his chest. As night falls and everyone begins to sleep, Kamishiro says goodnight to Bee and peacefully gazes up at the stars above. The following day, Takeru wakes up early and starts cleaning his scissors to pass the time until it's time to move out. Porin lets him know they'll hit the road after breakfast, but Takeru brings up a small request. He's never had the chance to drive a carriage before, so he asks Porin if he can give it a shot. Porin doesn't see a problem with it and hands over the reins without hesitation. Not long after, they reach the village. Takeru hops down from the carriage and Porin thanks him for sharing his meals. But Takeru insists he's the one who should be grateful. After all, he didn't have to walk the whole way back by himself. With that, Poran and his group ride off, and as they disappear into the distance, Marlowe watches them go and quietly remarking that spring must finally be here. Takeru raises an eyebrow at the comment and asks what he means, so Marlowe explains that Poran is a weaver by trade. Every year he travels south to warmer lands for work, and the trip is always hard on his family. Since he can't hunt during those journeys, they barely get by on scraps, which explains why he was so thrilled to try Takeru's cooking. Realizing what Poran goes through, Takeru starts to feel lucky because his ability to collect ingredients and materials has made things much easier for him. Later that day, Takeru visits Jerome's shop to hand over the materials he had been tasked with collecting. As a small experiment, he quietly slits one piece of magic-infused mithril ore, the kind he picked up from the dragon's lair, into the batch of regular mithril, just to see how Jerome reacts. The shopkeeper takes his time, carefully inspecting every piece. Eventually, he pauses and points to the odd one out, declaring that it must be a rare magic-infused mithril. Jerome explains that a few chunks of this stuff hold enough magical power to replace most of the kingdom's standard magic stones. Takeru pretends to be surprised, though he already knew exactly what it was. Jerome is impressed that Takeru managed to stumble upon something so rare, but Takeru shrugs, saying he just happened to come across it during his trip. Jerome doesn't buy the modesty. Even if it was just lying around, being able to recognize and retrieve a stone like that takes skill. He tells Takeru that if he really wants to make the most of his abilities, he should head to Belkame, a major city with a much bigger market. As much as Jerome doesn't like the idea of letting go of someone with so much potential, Takeru would have access to a wider selection of goods and better opportunities there. He only asks that when Takeru eventually makes a name for himself, he remembers to send a few good customers back to his shop. Takeru wasn't really aiming for fame or recognition, but the idea of heading to a major city sparked his curiosity. Once he got back to the inn, he decided to learn more about Belkame. There he discovered that the city had a well-established adventurers guild, one that handled quests from across the entire nation. The adventurers were organized into various roles, combatants, support types, and other specialties. Since he was now living in a different world, Takeru thought it might be fun to experience life as an adventurer, traveling from place to place. He set his sights on joining the guild in Belkame, but before heading out, he still had some unfinished business here in Tormy. First, he made his way into town to drop off the monsters he captured so they could be processed. With that taken care of, he spent the rest of the evening celebrating with the villagers, eating, drinking, and enjoying their hospitality. The following day, Takeru returned to the butcher. By then, all of the monster parts had been cleaned and prepared, giving him more than enough food and spices to keep him stocked throughout his trip. The woman behind the counter said the village would feel a little emptier without him, and that a lot of locals had been hoping he might stick around longer. Takeru admitted he'd missed the place too, but there were still so many places he wanted to see and so many people left to meet. He couldn't stay in one spot just yet. The woman smiled and said she understood and that she wouldn't try to convince him otherwise. Before he left, she handed him a cloth bag. Inside, she packed a full set of meals for the road. Actually, it was more than just one. She'd stuffed the bag full of travel lunches. Takeru was touched, and it looked like food wouldn't be a concern for quite some time. Later, back in his room, there was only one thing left on his mind: what to do with the magic mithril ore. Jerome had told him it was far too valuable for him to buy, which left Takeru unsure of what to do with it. Throwing it away was out of the question, but since the ore contained a strong magical presence, he began to wonder if he could use it to create something useful for the village as a way to say thanks. That's when his eyes landed on the lamp sitting on his table and an idea clicked. He grabbed the magic ore and tried merging it with the lantern. It didn't take long before he figured out the right process, and with a burst of light, he succeeded in crafting a magical item. The following day, just as he was about to leave, the entire village gathered to see him off. Takeru thanked them for all their kindness. As a token of his appreciation, he presented the item he'd made. He explained that it was an enchanted tool designed to generate a protective barrier around the village, one that would repel anyone with harmful intentions. The villagers were stunned by the gesture. While they deeply appreciated it, some of them hesitated, wondering if it was really alright to accept something so rare and priceless. Takeru reassures everyone that it's perfectly fine because he considers it the least he can do to repay their kindness. And also he wants to make sure the village is still safe and intact if he ever decides to come back for a visit. Jerome, however, can't help but wonder what kind of power source is behind the device. Curious, he opens it up for a closer look, and sure enough, inside is the magic-infused mithril ore worth a fortune. He's about to object and say they can't possibly accept such a valuable gift, but by the time he turns around, Takeru has already slipped out the gate and disappeared down the road, so it's too late to return it now. As Takeru makes his way toward Belkame, he takes a moment to appreciate the quiet countryside. The breeze is calm, the view is peaceful, but that doesn't last. Up ahead, standing square in the middle of the road, is a giant crab that looks like Mr. Salta. At first, he's a bit taken aback, but once the surprise wears off, Takeru checks Mr. Sulfa's stats and quickly realizes there's nothing too threatening about it. What really grabs his attention is the line that says it's edible. With a smirk, he decides tonight's dinner is going to be seafood. He casts a body enhancement spell to get ready for combat. But before he could even throw a punch, B zooms past him and lets out a piercing sonic scream that knocks the crab out cold in one hit. Takeru is amazed because he had no idea B had that kind of power. But there's no time to celebrate yet as two more crabs appear out of nowhere. Thinking he's safe by standing in the center of the road since crabs are supposed to only move sideways, Takeru relaxes. That is, until the crabs charge straight at him. Turns out these ones can move forward just fine, and in seconds they flanked him. As the claws close in, B reacts quickly and lifts Takeru into the air. The two crabs crash into each other below, giving him a lucky escape. Takeru thanks B for his fast thinking, but the fight isn't over. The first crab has recovered and lunges forward in a blind charge. Takeru summons his staff and smashes the crab straight into the sky, finishing it off for good. With the danger cleared, it's time to start preparing the meal. Takeru hardens his arm into a blade-like edge and starts cutting off the crab's claws and legs. After a few minutes of work, everything's ready to be boiled. He pulls out an enormous cooking pot and tosses all the crab parts in. He adds water, a generous amount of salt, and lets everything cook for a few hours. When it's finally done, the two of them sit down to eat. The crab meat is delicious, sweet, rich, and perfectly cooked, so Takeru and B devour every bite. From now on, Takeru decides he's going to start hunting and eating as many monsters as he can. If every battle leads to a new kind of meal, then he's all in. After a few days, Takeru and B finally arrive at the gates of Belkame. He stops for a moment, taken aback by the sheer size and grandeur of the city's fortified walls. They're massive and beautifully built and far more impressive than anything he's seen so far. As he approaches, he notices a long line of travelers waiting to be inspected before entry. Takeru joins the line, but before it's his turn, he discreetly casts a spell to mask his magic bag because he figures it wouldn't be a great idea for the guards to find out he's carrying an item with infinite storage. When his name is called, Takeru is led into a separate inspection room by the guards. One of them begins checking through his belongings, while the other asks about the reason for his visit. Takeru replies that he's here to register with the Adventurers Guild. The guard nods, saying that makes sense because Belkame is home to the largest guild on the entire continent. He doesn't think Takeru looks suspicious, but protocol is protocol, so he tells Takeru they'll be running a scan using something called a virus. Takeru blinks because he's never heard of it before, so he asks how it works. The guard explains that a virus is a magical tool designed to detect if someone's hiding anything shady. Takeru agrees, and the guard holds out the device, scanning him from head to toe. After a few seconds, the results come in, and nothing out of the ordinary. Feeling curious, Takeru activates his ability and takes a peek at what the guard actually saw. The stat window pops up, showing that Takeru is marked as a magic user, nothing else. That's a relief because none of the powerful skills or blessings he got from the deity showed up, which means his secrets are still safe. The guards give him the all clear, but just before letting him go, one of them stops him with another question. It's not a serious issue, but he's curious why Takeru's stat window shows a blessing of the dragon's tag. Takeru calmly explains that it's probably because of his pet. He calls B out, and the tiny dragon emerges, and both guards are stunned by how adorable she is. Fortunately, there are no regulations against pet dragons in Belkame, so they give him permission to enter the city with her. The only condition is that she needs to wear some kind of tag or mark to show she belongs to him, in case something happens. Takeru didn't bring a collar, but then he remembers the lucky charm he received from Porin's kids a few days ago. He pulls it from his bag and carefully ties it around B's tail, and the guard nods in approval that it'll work. They mention that they'll still need to submit a formal notice to the mayor's office about a dragon being registered in the city, but that's their job, and Takeru doesn't need to worry about it. After returning his bag, they point him down the main road and tell him that if he keeps going straight, he'll eventually reach the Adventurers Guild. As Takeru steps into the city for the first time, he's blown away by how lively and beautiful it is, far beyond what he expected. Just then, B points her tiny claw toward a large building at the end of the main street. Judging by its size and design, it's definitely the Adventurers Guild. Without hesitation, Takeru heads over and steps inside for a look around. Not long after, a woman named Ariana walks up and greets him warmly, welcoming him to the Adventurers Guild Europa. They're always happy to welcome new members, so she invites him over to the front desk to begin the registration process. She hands him a form and asks him to write down his name and current job. It sounds simple, but for a moment, Takeru pauses and realizes something odd. He still doesn't understand how he can read and speak the language of this world so fluently. After filling everything out, Ariana follows up by asking if he has any experience with combat. Takeru casually mentions that he's taken down a griffin, fought off a bunch of wolves, and even handled a couple of oversized crabs. It all sounds a bit too convenient, and Ariana quietly wonders if he's exaggerating, so she asks if he has any proof. Takeru says he does, but warns her that it's kind of big. Ariana, thinking it's nothing serious, tells him to go ahead. To her absolute horror, Takeru pulls a massive crab from his inventory and drops it right on her desk. The sheer weight of it splinters the wood into pieces. He instantly realizes he might have gone a bit overboard, but in his defense, he did warn her. All the other adventurers quickly gather around to see what's going on. The guild master arrives, asking what the commotion is, so Takeru deadpan replies that he just wanted to show Ariana his crab. The guild master, staring at the ruined desk and giant crustacean, says he can see that. But he's more curious about how Takeru pulled it out so casually, and he suspects an item box. He asks where Takeru got it, and Takeru explains that it was a gift. The guild master activates his own ability to confirm. It's similar to Takeru's scan, but instead of a stat window, he can read a person's aura and judge their intentions. Takeru's aura gives off nothing suspicious, so he decides there's no need for punishment, just an honest mistake. He says they can appraise the crab and offer a payout by the end of the day, but Takeru surprises everyone again by saying he actually plans to eat it later. The entire guild goes silent, stunned by the statement. The crowd grows even larger, so Ariana hurries to wrap things up and suggests they move to the next room. Once they're seated at a different desk, Ariana tells him the crab definitely proved his strength, no doubt about that. She then finishes processing the paperwork and hands him his official guild armband. She admits that someone of his caliber should probably be starting at a much higher rank, but guild rules are strict, and every newcomer starts at F rank. That said, with skills like his, she expects him to move up fast. This was the end of episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next episode.